Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to People Chat with Mona. I'm your host, Mona Lisa. Today, we'll be talking about something I'm quite passionate about, and which is one of my favorite topics within HR, which is learning and development and how we can cope on that aspect, especially with regards to the pandemic and all the changes that it's bringing with it. I have with me today literally one of my favorite people within the HR circle, Miss Yvette Elcock. Yvette is a trainer, facilitator, a coach. She works in Moonraker, and a company based in the UK, but works throughout the world. And I was acquainted with Yvette, I think, some 5 years ago, back when I worked in Heineken, as she has been facilitating several trainings for us in the Africa, Middle East, and Eastern region. So Yvette, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we start, I also want to highlight that Yvette and I are working in different locations, actually 2 different continents. And we're doing this podcast via Zoom. So I want to apologize ahead of time for any noise or sound quality issues that may occur during the call. So Yvette, thank you so much for joining us today.
That's my pleasure, and thank you for introducing me as a favorite person of yours.
It's true, it really is, because I've seen the impact you've had on so many people's lives, professionally and personally, over the years, also for myself. And that's why I just had to have you on this podcast, because I feel like what you have with expertise and knowledge could really help organizations throughout. Yvette,
thank you.
I want to start us off talking a little bit about the general terms of how the pandemic and the past 2 years of everything else that's been going on has affected the workplace, and what you think has been the ups and downs of that.
Yeah, so the first thing that I want to say is what a huge global shock to every organization, every community, every team, every employee, the whole world over. And I think sometimes we forget the scale of the impact of the COVID-19, the pandemic. And I think the other thing that we can forget is that there have been lots of losers, some really sadly with their lives. I read a statement, an article the other day, which said nearly 5 million people have died across the world. 5 million. I struggle to get my head around that.
Definitely.
And I think that one of the important roles for the world of work is saying, and where are those little bright spots starting to come back? Because if you're in a loser scenario or situation, it's going to be really difficult for you to find the bright spots, and you're going to need support. And I think those of us in the L&D and the coaching and the training and the facilitation community are maybe well positioned to be able to do that. So some of the things that come to mind when I think about the last 2 years, there has been the real demise of lots of established organizations. So companies across every continent that we all thought would always be there. In fact, we probably never really thought about them because they just were there. And so the organization or structures of leadership and management disappeared virtually overnight as different countries went into their timetable of lockdown. So suddenly the hierarchy of chief exec, C-suite, senior managers, junior managers, that disappeared because suddenly we're at home and we're having to be trusted by organizations to get on with what we need to do. And actually, I think the hierarchy suddenly became pets and children were at the top of the tree. because they
Yes.
would photobomb what was going on. So you've gone from working with your manager, alongside your manager, him or her, to having to lock the kids out of a bedroom so that you could sit cross-legged on a bed. And I don't think we should underestimate the impact of that. I was very lucky. I had a purpose-built office, but I've worked with very senior executives who are in the bedroom or in the kitchen and hoping that the child doesn't come in because they're homeschooling. So I think that organizational structure has gone, and I'm not sure people are really thinking through what might need to come back. I think it's just going to be too easy to go back to that linear structure. So that fascinates me in terms of the last two years. I think the other thing that happened, and I've done lots of work in this area, is a tearing up of the 2 to 3 year strategic plan. Now, companies put a lot of store on having this beautifully crafted plan, and it has a vision and a mission and some goals and some objectives, and they get communicated. They're often used to try and engage people to what the organization is going on. And then suddenly overnight, there's been no strategic thinking time to get a response into the pandemic. So everything goes out the window. People go into survival mode, and rightly so, but they had to give up for a period of time. And I suspect some organizations have not yet really gone back to thinking about this. You know, how do you grow revenue when, if you're in the leisure and entertainment industries, you're not allowed to open? How do you delight the customers when you can't actually interact with the customers? How do you engage employees and recruit and keep them when you don't meet them? And how do you drive operational efficiencies when your base mark point has suddenly disappeared? So I think that's really interesting. What is the real value of a strategic plan when we've lasted the last 2 years, probably without one, because it got changed so much. So I think that's quite an interesting thing in terms of what level of planning, particularly in the people space, goes back into place when people start to return like they are now. I think it's really challenged organizational leaders. Well, I think the opportunity has been there for organizational leaders to really rethink how they lead. What are the core qualities that they bring into their leadership style? How do they blend in all those different management skills so that they become the leader, the leader that they want to be, and they work in a way that has a positive and productive impact on their teams. And again, that helps people want to stay with them, and not just their teams, but across the business. So cross-functional silos have always existed, and that was when people were physically co-located. When they haven't been physically located, what has happened to those silos? Have they broken down? Have they opened up? And what are the good bits that have come out of doing that? So I think that's quite interesting as well. And then my final point, I really think it's interrupted planned learning and development activity.
Oh, for sure.
So again, when I think about my clients, as you say, across the globe, really, any planned learning and development interventions, or any planned talent management, from recruiting to engaging to retaining, all of that activity which had been in there just stopped. Yeah. So as a business, I lost 75% of my revenue in year one of the pandemic, because organizations just said, cancel. And I think that is quite interesting how they decide what they pick up from that, because I do not think it is as simple as just going back to where they were. I suspect a lot of people would want to. But I do think there is one bright spot in all of that. And I was saying earlier, I think L&D is well placed for that. It has accelerated the development of skills connected to technology.
Oh,
so
yes.
I'm at a mature place in my career, and I've had to learn Zoom and Teams and other communication platforms.
Yeah.
I use LinkedIn and Twitter and different social media platforms, and I think that everybody has needed access to the internet. I think the internet companies have done a lousy job in managing and supporting the workplace during the pandemic, but it has been there. So some people have been able to really flourish and set themselves up for success. And some organizations have been on the front foot and provided a laptop for people very quickly, or an iPad, some form of technology. So I think, some have flourished, some have not, and they're no longer with us, but all of that huge impact on the world of work generally is quite interesting around how does that play out over the next decade or so, because I think it will be that much of a shock.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I really see, especially your last point with digitally now, companies are either on board or they're really struggling because they refuse to still get on board with the digital age. And I see that now with a lot of companies and a lot of people that refused to even bother working on an email, now working on Zoom and figuring out how to use different gadgets, which I think is quite wonderful because of the era we're in now. But all the other setbacks that you've mentioned, I feel like are reflected upon different parts of the world. And we think it's only in the Western world that these struggles usually happen, but it's really not. Even people in Africa have struggled with it. People, especially for me, something close to home is Ethiopia. I've seen a lot of companies either being able to take advantage of the pandemic to grow their business, or really just trying to wait it out and have been suffering now for 2 years because they think, oh, in a few months it will be gone, and it really doesn't. This is something that's probably here to stay for the next 3-4 years. And yeah, you did mention a really good point. I want to talk a little bit specific to L&D now. What you've seen has been the impact. I reckon it's a lot of setbacks and not too many positive sides, but I'd really like to see your point of view on that as well.
Yeah, I have a list now, but I it's quite interesting what you say about that world of work, because I'm very conscious that I'm sat here as an established L&D practitioner coming towards the end of my career, and that is my perspective. And it'll be interesting to see which points really matter to which generations of people and workers in the environment. And again, I think that L&D kind of have a role potentially to play in that. So I have a few more points that weigh on my mind really, and do interrupt me, because you know me, when I get on full flow, I can just talk and talk and talk.
But I like to listen, so it helps.
So first of all, I think one of the things I noticed about L&D was there was this huge rush to turn face-to-face offerings into some form of online offering. And there were some really good things out of that. And in my experience and my view, more negatives than good have come out of that. Because whilst there was some innovation and some professional rigor in different L&D organizations, whether literally situated inside an organization or as a supplier in the supply chain, there was some innovation and professional rigor. And there was a lot of less professional lift and shift. And by that, I mean, oh, well, we can run the same program, but we just do it on Zoom or on Teams or on some other communication platform. Driven, I suspect, and I understand, but driven, I suspect, by wanting to keep revenue. As I said, I lost 75% in the first year. In this second year, I've come back up a bit, but I'm still only operating at 50% of what I was pre-COVID. So the good people, the good organizations, the good suppliers of L&D, and the good internal teams said, okay, let's get creative. Let's find a way to do something new. And what do we need to change about the face-to-face stuff? I don't think enough people did that. And I suspect that there are some programs out there that are on shaky ground in terms of the integrity of the L&D offering. Some of that, I think, and this is the second point, I think that, you know, as part of L&D professionals, we have 4 key things that we need to make sure we cover in our role, and make sure that they are aligned across the work that we do. And I call it Yvette's 4D, D for Delta cycle. So diagnostics. So what is it that our people think they want to learn? What is it that our business leaders think our people need to learn? And then where do the two come together? Yeah. Mm. And I'm not sure that people in L&D really went out to people while they were working from home to say what will help. And this would have been a huge engagement tool and retention tool. So people had suddenly gone from all that informal interaction in offices to working from home in a huge variety of different home environments. We can't make assumptions. Everybody has internet, even in the 21st century. A lot of people may not have access to easy internet. And goodness knows, I'm in the UK and in the southwest of the UK. And my internet access on some days, I think like I'm at the highest mountain in Nepal or something. So I think that is interesting. I'm not sure. Yeah. So I think diagnostics, we need to do a lot better. Design. So this is about then, once you've done a diagnostic or not, what's the quality of your design and how much do you design with a remote learner in mind rather than somebody who's face-to-face. So I know for me, my style is very relational, and I've had to be really quite strict with myself in terms of I can't do something in the way that I used to do it when I'm online compared to how I would do it if I was in a training room with you back in 2015. And I could stand next to you and give you extra energy and encouragement and support and challenge. So I think that's probably a neutral, you know, if diagnostic, I think we've been read as an L&D and we need to get a lot better. Design, some of it's been good, some of it hasn't. So more of an amber kind of thing. Delivery. So when we're actually training or when we're actually facilitating, particularly in the group context, I think with the one-to-one context, we've done better because we're only having to look on one person. Yeah. But I think there has been a confusion over some of the real basics. Am I going to do a 1-hour instruction piece, or am I going to train them, or is it more facilitation? Is it coaching? And those things require different setups and different ways in and different ways out of them. And when you have a group of people, the group dynamics that you can observe or pick up on from a remote Zoom communication, for example, they're still there, but they're different. And how much should we really get ourselves ready and think about our core style of delivery and what we might need to dial up or dial down because of working through a platform. And then the 4th D is, did it work? So evaluation. Yeah. And, you know, what evaluation has been done from people working from home on their performance now? How much feedback have they really had? And, you know, the people that I used to work with on my training programs would often say, I don't get feedback. So I'm thinking, I wonder what's happened to that feedback as we've worked from home and as we've gone through the pandemic. So if you think of those 4, I think they're misaligned, and I think there is less overall systemic integrity within the L&D function, and I think that's huge. I think that's a big thing that won't go away. I don't think we will go back to only face-to-face or only online. I think each organisation needs to find its own kind of individual balance point based on diagnostics, design, delivery, and did it work as a system there. So I'm really interested to see how that happens. Everything stopped for 12 months in L&D, roughly 12 months is my experience with my clients and my business. So things like partnership working and relationship building or maintaining, everything went quiet, and calls were unanswered, emails were unanswered. So there was, and this was from my L&D or HR director contacts, and I've been an HR director as well, and I was quite surprised. I thought I might get more one-off conversations with HR directors or the C-suite that I coach to go, oh my goodness, help me think through what I'm going to do with this. And that was often the purpose of reaching out to them to say, you know, come and get just a free chat with me to unmuddy your head, really. And people didn't do that. So they were in classic shock of big traumatic change there. So there were also within that, I think, when clients stopped, people got furloughed, and some people needed to go and look for alternative employment without that. So if you're a small independent L&D organisation, like my own or like some of the people that work in my team, they needed to get work, and some of it was they needed paid work, and some of it was volunteering just to maintain some kind of relational stance. And I wonder how L&D and HR departments kept track on those people who needed to exit them, and therefore know that there is this population of people that might want to come back in as things start to return to the new way of working. And I think that the other thing for suppliers, external suppliers like me, was my organization kind of fell in the middle. So small traders needed to go and get a job because they hadn't been trading for long enough. Big traders in the L&D space could furlough staff and claim various government grants depending upon which country and how big you were. And then those in the middle, like my organization, we just had to hope that savings and previous profits got us through. And I am blessed that it has for me. But I think all of that, when you come back into an organization, if I'm working with a senior L&D professional and they've been furloughed and have had 80% of their pay, as was the case in the UK for a while, and I've been living off all my savings, I wonder what happens there with the dynamics between us. So again, there's a re-engagement, piece. I think the other thing with L&D, or another thing, I think the balance of group and individual work has changed. So I think there's a drive towards a more personal, or the personalization of the learning journey, and therefore the employee experience. And this is a great way to look at everything on an employee experience map, from recruitment through to initial L&D through to retention and engagement kind of things there. So, you know, I used to have probably 8 2-week trips out to Addis Ababa, where we first met, every year for the previous 4 or 5 years. And I've not had that now. So I've been in the UK for nearly two years next month, I think. No, 2 years this month, actually. That's unheard of. So there's something around in that balance of work, both in terms of location, and in terms of is it group or one-to-one. What do I need to pick up? What do I notice my clients picking up? And what might they just need to leave there because it's good, you know? So I'm not sure that organizations are thinking about that, in terms of, if we've managed a year without doing anything face-to-face, and we used to have a consultant in to work with our internal department 8 times a year, then we still have people here. So is there more of a personalized approach that we want from the consultant rather than a blanket approach? And I'm not sure people are thinking that. The good people in L&D have upskilled themselves, so they know how to run Zoom and put people into breakout rooms and chat, or they know how to manage team meetings and make it as interactive as possible. They've moved from PowerPoint onto Prezi, which is a new and more interactive style. They've moved from paper evaluation into things like responster.com, where you can do everything through email, collate it, get a report. And diary management has gone on to doodle polls and different online apps and things that can help you with that. So there's something about choosing the bits of technology that suit you and not to worry about all of it. And the last point I would make, and in many respects, for me, I think it's the biggest or the most important point, is this revisit your why as an L&D department. What is it, or why do you exist as L&D, and then why do you exist as an L&D professional within whatever that structure might be? So there is Confucius, the Chinese philosopher, has a saying, and he says, if you find a job you love, then you will never work a day in your life. Yeah, I like that saying. It's such a great saying, yeah. If you find a job you love, you will never work a day in your life. Now I'm very lucky. I think I'm at that stage in my career. But I think there is something that says to L&D professionals and the team members that they work with, why are we here? And this reminded me then of the Japanese ikigai concept. What's your reason to live? So if every L&D person, if everybody, let me just heal the world, if everybody thought about what is it the world needs right now, what is it that I can do and get some pay and salary from that. We all work to be able to do that. What is it I'm good at? And then, what is it that I love? And if we can get that sweet spot in the middle of those 4 different areas overlapped like a Venn diagram, would that not be powerful? My organization's mission is about delivering powerful learning experiences that strengthen self-belief, build capability, and positively impact the world of work. When I put that together 12 years ago, maybe, I was like, wow, that's a bit big. Who am I to, dream to impact the world of work? And now, 12 years on, I'm thinking, wow, if I look at my global clients, if I look at my smaller clients, if I was to do a count up of the people that I've touched, I would hopefully be making a difference. And I think that's my sweet spot in the middle, delivering these powerful learning experiences and one by one changing and impacting the world of work. So I think that every L&D team has that as an opportunity. And they need to know within the boundaries and the context of their organizational vision, what's their L&D vision, what's their why, and the how and the what can come later. As Simon Sinek talks about how, why, how, what. So I think that becomes really important. So there's a lot on L&D's plate. It's not just about, people are coming back into the office, what do we need to do with them? I think it's really is a back to beginning and a resetting, excuse me, and some kind of diagnostic.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, I was just about to actually ask you, especially based on one of the points that you made, being, are you okay, Yvette? Good.
Yeah, I'm on my soapbox. I love talking about L&D. So
I know.
I'm getting excited and I got a cough.
Sorry, I hope you're okay now.
Mm-hmm.
So something that you said, but you were going on about it so passionately that I didn't want to interrupt, even though you invited me to do so, was what you said about L&D. There was nothing going on for a year, and companies kind of put that on the sidelines while they were on firefighter mode. But then when I really think about it, had you also focused on your talents and your L&D at that moment, you could have really reaped the benefits now with the new way of working and the hybrid way of working versus the old way. And so with L&D, what is your view on like how should L&D departments really structure themselves within the organization to make sure that their agenda isn't put on the sideline when things are strict? Because we hear from companies that learning and development is important, employee engagement, that sort of thing. Really, we're always preaching, especially as HR, the importance of these things. But you see that when there's issues like the COVID-19 pandemic that come up, and it's like a really heightened situation where companies are losing revenue and this and that, these type of things are sort of put to the side. So I fear that it will put in employees this sort of narrative that this isn't priority as much as sales would be, or as much as revenue management and that sort of thing. So how would you suggest L&D structure themselves to make sure that, these type of things don't happen? And also what you mentioned about the senior leaders valuing coaching and coming to you when things are going well, but then you see that when issues really are heightened, they sort of put that to the back and try to like rummage things on their own.
Well, I think that's a great question. And it takes me back to what I think is one of the fundamental dilemmas in our people community at its broadest. And that is that, as I've been working for 35 years now. And when I started, we had personnel managers. And these people delivered cups of tea and sympathy and a little bit of structure around that to try and make sure everybody was treated in the same way. And you might have had a head of personnel that was invited into the boardroom every now and again. Yeah. I think if we accelerate up to today, we now have chief people officers or chief human resources officers who sit at the boardroom table day in and day out and have, as well as their professional functional skills, they have broader leadership and business skills. They get the organization across all functions. They look outwards into the strategic marketplace that their organization is operating in. And I have a dream. That next door to the chief people officer or the chief HR officer, there is a chief learning architect that sits at the boardroom table that says continually, okay, if the HR people plan looks like this, with recruiting this many top talents, this many people who are strong performers, then what's the development plan alongside of that? And I think there's a gap. I think that as a business marketplace, the learning and development function has always seemed to be part of HR, but not quite an equal partner. So salaries are lower, for example. The status that many cultures give to somebody in L&D is lower than it would be if you were an HR director. And I've done both, and so I speak from experience. And so I wonder what it would take. So I think there is a real opportunity to rethink and rename and repurpose what we do as L&D professionals. So if rather than being an L&D manager, I could be a learning architect, for example, that better tells people what I do, because an architect designs and draws and puts in place things that are beautiful and stable and safe. And I think that's what we should be doing as well. Yeah. So I think there needs to be a fundamental rethink of the role of L&D within and outside of the context of HR. So wouldn't it be great if, you know, your previous organization where we met, if you'd had the HR director and then alongside you'd had the L&D or the OD director, and that they weren't part and parcel of that. I've been an HR director, and what I found out was I didn't want to be an HR director. I wanted to be number one in L&D. And I can remember my colleagues, my boss, my senior stakeholders thinking that I was mad because I wanted to limit what I could do by staying in L&D instead of becoming an HR, instead of staying as an HR director. And that is still there. And that was over 20 years ago now. But that underlying attitude about where L&D sits within HR and other people functions is still there. So I think there is something, as people go back in, let's really think about how do we name what we do in L&D?
Yeah.
How do we really name it so that people get it, so that when budgets need to be cut, the training budget or the L&D budget isn't the first place to go, because that won't really have any impact. It has a huge impact on employee retention and employee engagement.
Definitely, and motivation, and I think a lot of other things. And that indirectly always impacts your revenue. So that's
absolutely. So I think there was a real opportunity, particularly at the start of this huge global shock to the system and the energy within those different systems, to say to some of the L&D facilitators, team members, whatever their job titles, your job for the next week is to ring or get in touch somehow, message, whatever, 10 employees a day to check they're okay. Wouldn't that have been fabulous?
That would have been amazing,
Check what they need, and the data, the diagnostic data which would have come from that would have been phenomenal. They are all okay, but this theme has come out. And I think that as people start to go back into the office now, you know, that kind of objective, I'm going to speak to 10 different people every day for the next 3 months. That's nearly 1,000 people. And if you're an organization of 2,000, 5,000, that's a huge proportionate sample. And you can check in with your employees as they come back in. And I think that even in the best organizations where they have done that, they've done it as a process, as opposed to it being an engagement and retention policy. So they might have sent out a questionnaire, or some kind of poll like you see on LinkedIn at the moment. And that's very different to somebody taking the time to ring you and go, how are you really? You know, what can we do for you? I can't promise you anything, but if we could do one thing for you, what would that be? You know, and I think that the L&D space, the development space, is probably more attuned to that than the HR space, who rightly need to be going, are we implementing different policies? You know, are we keeping people safe? So I'm not in any way decrying the role of HR in that, but let's get ourselves up onto an equal footing and say, why am I kept within that? If you look at in the UK, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, they have something like, I'm going to say 15 or 20 competencies that their institute believes come together to form an HR person. And only 1 or 2 of those, maybe 3, link into developing people. Like, that can't be right. You know, that can't be right. That's misaligned. That's misaligned. So I think that's, as people go back in, you know, one of the things I said that happened was organizational hierarchies in the world of work per se have changed enormously from boss down to employee. But this is an example of an organizational structure where you think something needs to be different. And I think some of that is, what is it I'm actually doing? And then what title better represents that than probably what I've got at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And I see the title has an impact, because sometimes you see companies now no longer say HR director, they say head of people. And that feels a little more personalized. Also, what you said about the phone call versus a questionnaire, when it's less about the company wants to know how you are, and it's more about your L&D manager wants to know how you're doing, and they want to see how they can help you. There's this like untold personal touch that really impacts people, and it's the little things that you don't think make an impact actually that do, and completely change a perspective of an employee from good to bad, or vice versa.
Yeah, and I think the focus for many organizations, I was talking to a general manager of a large organization on the African continent only about 3 weeks ago. And he was like, actually, we've been quite lucky. We've kept going. We've stayed open. We've still been making money. And I want you to come and do some work with the top team and their report, so about 20 people in total, to make sure that we sustain it. And I went, whoa. So I hear the results focus. Where's the relationships in all of that?
Yeah.
People haven't seen each other. Some of these people won't have seen each other for like 18 months. If you don't get the relationships back on a footing, then the results will not necessarily be as easy as they have been when you've had people in different locations. So the relational opportunities need not to be overlooked in the rush to try and claw back the revenue that has been lost over the last 2 years. And I worry quite a bit that will happen unless L&D can again step into that space to go, absolutely, everybody needs results. My organization, as small as it is, needs results, but just reversing the attention. We get results and therefore we can afford to train people. If we can switch that to say, we're going to really develop people so that they want to get the results and they want to exceed expectations, and they want to love coming up in the morning, that will do it. And it would be interesting to look at studies to see the impact on efficiency and productivity and the first time right and all of this type of terminology that goes on in many diagnostic data driven organizations, to go, and how are people feeling alongside all of that. It's interesting, the relational bit and where that would come.
I definitely agree. So Yvette, I know you have a few tips for us and the L&D, well, actually HR in general and HR personnel.
Yeah, anybody with people.
Anybody with people, exactly. That's why we call it the people chat and not HR
exactly.
Chat.
Great title, by the way. Great title.
Thank you.
So yeah, I do have, and I was challenging myself to keep them as hints and tips, because as you can hear, I can talk for a long time. So I think as people professionals, always start with the end in mind. So Stephen Covey talks about this in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective Managers, but start with the end in mind. We all work for our salary or our pay. We all have that as a basic motivational need. But if we can find that sweet spot where our vocation and our passion and our mission and our vision, where all of that comes together in that Japanese concept, then I think that what the steps then to get to that sweet spot are likely to be more robust and resilient than if we only have a financial target, for example. Not everything has to have a financial value. And depending where you are within a people function or within your career, within your community, I think that can get lost sometimes. So have your end in mind as an individual, and then within your people function, be clear that everybody there knows what the end in mind is,
Yes,
and make
agreed.
that as engaging and as collaborative as possible. I think if you're a supplier like myself, then you need to really rebalance your portfolio of what you offer accordingly. So go out back into your client organizations. And, you know, there is this myth around work-life balance that is still out there, that everything needs to be perfectly balanced. It never will be. There's a great TED talk by Dan Thurman where he busts the myth, and I probably showed it to you on one of those occasions that we met.
Juggling, yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and it's having a work-life integration that works for you. Yeah,
thank you.
And I think that if people, professionals, can again personalize what that means to the people in an organization, then that's really, really useful. And I know I've had feedback around, you know, gosh, you work too many hours in a day. And I go, for me, that works. And I also have 2 weeks holiday every 3 months. So it's integrated, you know, balance is not there. But start with the end in mind. That would be my first one. Research your competitors tirelessly. So there will be, and I'm hearing, an increase in very targeted headhunting to have people jump ship into competitor organizations, particularly where there has been a lot of great people development activity going on. And it's almost like these people really are picked, you know, they are the sweetest fruit on the tree. So what is it those competitors are doing, both to get people to further develop their skills and to then retain and keep those people? So I think that is there, and then review what you offer in that space as a people person. Keep learning. So there has been, and this is a bit of a double-edged sword, but there has been a huge rise in the amount of free, short-based webinars, podcasts, online learning programs that are free or virtually free. And I think that's been useful to keep people busy with doing something and to continue to stretch their minds. My worry is that in doing that, people have contributed to the people development is a cheap, low-cost thing to do. And so I worry for L&D professionals, how do they now get back the value into what they do? And I have some colleagues in consultancies like my own who, you know, everything all their fee rates were cut by a half, or their program attendance was cut by 75% because it was online. They're never going to get that. They're not never, but they are going to struggle to get back to where they were.
I see that.
Over the next 2 years. And so I think there is something around how can you keep learning as the professional, and how can you enable others to keep learning at the appropriate value that you're adding to the organization. So link it to your why, and also, you know, hold that growth mindset. So Carol Dweck's work and people like that, hold that growth mindset where you're looking for every opportunity within that. Live a resilient life, you know, manage your energy, these are real basics, get the sleep in place, drink a proper amount of water, eat as healthily as you can, do a bit of exercise. In fact, I'm going out for a gym session after this, and keep connecting with people. You know, so manage yourself well, wherever you are, whether you're a senior director who likes to go for a 5K run, or somebody who likes to lift weights in the gym, but do something just that is entirely for you. I'm lucky, I live 15 minutes from the sea, so I can go and spend time there. This next one, I think there is something for people. So if we've got start with the end in mind, we've got research your competitors tirelessly, we've got live a resilient life and keep learning. I think there's something that says it would be very easy to focus on the here and now, the immediacy. And I think we've had to do that, or we've chosen to do that for the last 2 years. I would now invite people to start to think 5 to 10 years ahead. So people who are currently in the educational or academic system have had a very different experience of that than I would or you would. So what is it that today's younger population who have not yet entered the world of work, what are they going to need to get them ready for the world of work that as an employer and as a people function you might now need to be offering because it hasn't been there at a formative period in their education or academics. So keep, what do you need to give people to learn about the world of work when we've had this 2-year gap about the world of work? And then the final point for me is celebrate absolutely everything that you can. I think we were never very good at celebrating successes in most organizations. We were just relentlessly on to the next thing. I think as people try to regroup and get back to the previous revenue or the previous market share or the level of customer engagement, you can forget to celebrate along the way. Whatever celebrate looks like for you as an individual, for you as an organization, and for the culture within which the organization kind of works, really. So yeah, that's quite a few tips, but start with the end in mind. Research your competitors, keep learning, live a resilient life, think the next generation ahead, and just celebrate, have fun, be kind to yourself and to others.
I think this is such amazing, solid advice that it would work for just about anyone doing anything, not just L&D or HR. I love it. I think,
people. Yeah. And if people just listen to this and go away and say, I'm going to be kind to the next person that I see, what a wonderful opportunity that is. Yeah. Or I'm really going to say, hello, how are you? And not just take fine, or good or okay. No, really, how are you? So if people only take from this, there are lots of opportunities, and start with being kind, then I'll be very happy. I'll have impacted the world of work, hopefully.
I think you have, Yvette.
I did not know I had that much to say, but there you go.
I love it. I think this was such solid, amazing advice. And I mean, your perspective, like I said before, is quite amazing to see because it's quite well-rounded and very generic, yet very specific to everybody, which I think is going to help a lot of people. Those were the questions and points that I had for us today. Thank you so much for our session. Are there any last words you'd like to say? Or have you said
Be kind to yourself. Be kind and start with yourself. The rest will come.
I definitely love that. Well, this was a great session, Yvette. I, for one, could just hear you talk for hours, but I think I won't take up so much of your time hereafter. Thank you so much for today's session and for agreeing to come. I mean, this is a great opportunity for myself and all the listeners that we'll have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Have a nice rest of the day. And thank you all for tuning in and listening to our second episode of the People Chat.